I'm head grower at Y Organic. I grow veg in a half-acre wall garden, which you can see here. We have about 2 acres of field crops with a view to expanding because there's plenty of land around. Land isn't our limiting factor. The veg operation works in collaboration with a cut flower business. Well, it's all one business, but the cut flower operation and meat as well. We have beef and lamb. So our business is 3 parts, which works fairly cooperatively underneath a estate owner. We're on a large estate in the valley there. We've been going about 5 years. So I'm going to talk about intercropping and catch cropping with basically sharing all the techniques that I've used over the past 15 years, things that have worked and things that haven't worked. I'm not so much coming at it from theory, but from practice is what actually happened when we put different crops together. So that's a little bit small, but I'll talk through it all anyway. Intercropping, the idea of growing 2 different crops alongside each other in the same beds, feels like it's increasingly important with intensive small market gardens that have become the trend over the last sort of 10 or so years. I sort of think of it as the post-JMF era since Jean-Martin Fortier's book came out, and it felt like there was a bit of a revolution in market gardening and a tendency to small market gardens with very intensive production, which is, broadly speaking, our model, certainly in the walled garden and in the polytunnels. So the benefits of intercropping, the really obvious one is that you're making use of all the available space. If you've got a bed with just a small tomato plant in the middle, there's soil all around it, which you've probably put compost on and is probably going to get watered, you might as well make use of it because you've done 3/4 of the job anyway. It's particularly useful during the hungry gap, and almost all the examples I'm going to give are kind of mid-spring examples, especially with when Solanaceae and cucurbits are going in. But for us, we run a veg box scheme all year round, so those hungry gap crops are really critical. And intercropping can also help with weed suppression, providing shade. A really good example of that is the lettuces that we grow alongside our peas, which bolt much slower than lettuces grown as a single crop in a bed. Especially in a year like this one, when it was so hot early on, the lettuces kept cropping far longer because of the shade, provided we were keeping an eye on watering. Cooler soil can also benefit some crops. So if tomatoes are bare underneath, black soil or dark colored soil gets really hot, and tomatoes don't actually like their feet too hot. Whereas if there's a spread of a crop underneath the tomatoes, that's going to cool the soil, which the tomatoes prefer as well. Not in all cases. I found that peppers hate that, and peppers benefit from having the soil barer for increased heat, or possibly with a dark ground cover fabric. Frost protection is sometimes overlooked as well. A good example of this would be growing cucumbers alongside spinach, where the cucumbers and the spinach are similar sizes, and if you get a hard spring frost in April or something like that, the spinach will help protect the cucumbers from damage. Lots of disadvantages to intercropping. I think rather cruelly and without permission, I've included a photo there from Oxton's Organics from when they grew celery alongside peppers with disastrous consequences. I have loads of disasters of my own, but I didn't take photos of them due to shame. So, the important thing is to learn from these things. So the disadvantage is obviously competition for water, light, and nutrients. I think if anyone was in Pete Dollymore's talk earlier, he mentioned the problems that intercropping can cause with something like a shallow-rooted crop alongside something like spinach that's really high demanding and competing for water. So you've got to adjust your regimes appropriately. We would give heavier compost to tomatoes that are going to get intercropped with something like spinach, because we're placing a lot of demands on the soil there, and we need to water a lot more in response. So you need to carry awareness that competition is a very real thing, and it's going to it's going to impact your cropping, and that needs management. Antagonistic plant combinations, I've no idea if this is a fact or not, but we've found that any brassicas we've grown alongside cucumbers have been fairly awful, had a terrible effect on the cucumbers. I feel that cucumbers just hate brassicas, whereas there's other combinations that are really beneficial to both. Awful lot of books out there about companion planting, which sort of some truth and some conjecture, I suppose. So all I can really share is what I've experienced. Probably the biggest disadvantage, one of the biggest disadvantages for us of intercropping is it restricting the use of ground cover fabric, where I've heard that using white ground cover fabric with tomatoes can almost double yields, which is really exciting, and I desperately want to do it, because that white ground cover fabric is keeping the soil cooler and reflecting light up to the tomato, so the tomato gets almost double the light it would do otherwise. But we haven't even tried that because of our intercropping with tomatoes is so important. It's such a big source of hungry gap crops for us. And it's just not really compatible with using ground cover fabric, which it's just a bit frustrating. I've put on there hoeing. I mentioned before that companion plants can help with weed suppression. At the same time, they can make weed control more complicated. You can't do a really quick wheel hoeing around your pepper plants if you've got companions all around them. So sometimes with that complex cropping, hand weeding becomes the only answer, which is more labor intensive. I've also put on there that I'm not thinking of specific examples, but harvesters, for example, tomatoes, might trample the companion, e.g. agretti. Not thinking of specific examples, almost every week we trample our agretti trying to pick tomatoes. Kind of annoying. You just need to carry an awareness that you've got this precious crop under your feet. Try to think about that. Kind of my own fault for making my kids harvest the tomatoes. So it does need careful management and judgment and a little bit of caution. Fleece conflicts I put on there as well. Spring onions are one of our most important intercropped plants, but spring onions don't like fleeces very much. Whereas if we've got spring onions and things like courgettes and solanaceae alongside each other in the spring when frost is a risk, we might still need to fleece, which the tunnel courgettes are going to love, but the spring onions alongside them are not going to enjoy so much, increasing the risk of mildew and so on. I've also put on there conflicting water needs. For example, we stop water, like a lot of growers, we stop watering tomatoes in August. So if we've got a lot of companions alongside the tomatoes, they might struggle with that a little bit more. So I'm going to talk through some specific examples of intercropping that we've done. Our tunnel courgettes are one of our most profitable crops. We sow them in the beginning of March, plant out at the beginning of April, and harvest can start from as early as mid-May, at a time when everyone wants courgettes. They're willing to pay a good price. No one's sick of them yet. That happens about 2 weeks into cropping. So we got 3 different ways of growing. Well, spinach is the best companion for courgettes that we use. The 3 different ways of doing it is an overwintering spinach crop, which might be planted out in the tunnel, maybe October, for example, light picking over winter, and then it really starts motoring from kind of April onwards. And what we would do is pull out some of the central row of the spinach and plant the courgettes in amongst it, like you can see in this picture. We might also do that from a spring planting of spinach and maybe plant the spinach and the courgettes around about the same time. I found that drilling spinach when you plant the courgettes, the spinach doesn't really compete so well at that rate, whereas transplanting at the same time does work. And that's quite good because the overwintering stuff is growing really fast and getting quite big and doesn't always benefit the courgettes as much. So the best is planting them from mods at the same time in early April. And then we take a few picks from that before eventually the spinach we'd pull out and allow the courgettes to grow on. Spring onions have done really, really well for us in a very similar way. We do them from a kind of maybe late August, early September sowing, plant out a whole load of spring onion mods which grow over winter, and then by the first week of April, they're just about big enough to harvest. We'd pull out the central row, plant courgettes down the middle, and allow the spring onions to grow on. As they get bigger, they're still sellable, but you only need to put 3 to 5 in a bunch instead of 7 to 9. That's really, really good use of space for us. Got a few more pictures of courgettes and spinach enjoying life. That's an overwintering spinach that's been cut a couple of times. That courgette looks like it's been in the ground sort of 10 days or something, probably. And while I was on courgettes, there's a really nice picture on the back cover of Tolly's book, Growing Green, of courgettes undersown with clover. I did a screen grab. It's a pretty rubbish picture there, but you get the picture. I wasn't going to cover green manures quite so much. I was going to focus on crop intercropping rather than undersowing and things like that. But it is worth being aware that's all part of the same kind of picture. So on to tomatoes. That's agretti, freshly planted agretti. Agretti plus tomatoes is probably the all-time most fantastic, brilliant intercropping. And if you're not doing it at the moment, I highly recommend it. It works so well. I feel like the tomatoes benefit from the agretti, and the agretti enjoy it underneath the tomatoes. And I said that thing, if you stop watering your tomatoes in August, I find the agretti doesn't mind that too much. It's getting coarse by that time of year anyway. But it doesn't seem to make much difference compared to having it without the companion. And what we do then, we just let the agretti go on and form seeds, little plantlets, which we save for the next year. So that's a really good combination. And the other thing is, if your agretti's not ready when the toms go in, we can plant the agretti when the tomatoes have been in about 6 weeks, which I think is the case here. You can see the tomato plant in the background, quite large at that point. I wonder if this photo might have been taken in something like mid-May, actually, and the agretti's only just gone in, but it's quite happy in those conditions, and it will grow on quite well. We also plant some agretti at the same time as the tomatoes go in, which would be mid-April, maybe. And that's, sorry, the picture's not great again, but that's a picture of the toms towards the end of the season. There's a whole load of agretti underneath them here, and the odd tagetes plant as well. We've got tagetes, French marigolds, orange and red varieties in amongst the agretti too, and they're a brilliant, brilliant. They're quite a good edible flower, but they're best as a beneficial insect attractor and for putting off aphids. They're my all-time favorite beneficial flower, and the fact they're edible and really attractive as well helps, and it smells amazing. Funny you should ask that. Where's my basil and tomato slide? So the other ones we do are basil, which is along here in that bed. It also works really, really well. And anise hyssop here. If anyone's grown that, it's a tip that came from Addy and Risa originating with their time at Trill Farm, I think. It's really incredibly scented herb that we put just a handful of it in the salad bags, and or maybe one leaf per bag or something. When the customer opens their salad bag, they get this anise smell, which is it's unique, really amazing, and that does well under the tomatoes, provided you pick it hard enough. It can get a bit big, but when it gets to sort of that kind of size, we just trample it down. We don't even bother ripping it out, and then you've got a carpet of kind of aniseed fragrance. Whenever you pick, you walk on it and get this beautiful smell. It's really, really lovely. And some chefs buy the edible flower off that as well. Anise hyssop. It does look like stinging nettle. So sometimes customers say there was a stinging nettle in my bag, in my salad bag, and I say no, it isn't. It's definitely anise hyssop. Then they show me a photo, and I was like, oh shit, that was a stinging nettle actually. Again, getting the under 10s to pick the salads, always a problem. We generally we don't lower and lean the tomatoes actually. Um, yeah, right. Hmm. The we also do, in the same way I described with the spinach and courgettes, we do spinach and tomatoes. That's another good combination. You can see there Sean with the really, really nice bed of spinach there. That's probably an early spring module planting. Probably would have done 5 rows and then harvested and pulled out the middle row and then planted the tomatoes down the middle. And then we'll keep picking the spinach for a little bit longer. Um, I told Sean to try and look happy in that picture. And another one of our workers, Elliot, doing similar there. Also instructed to look happy. More of a grimace, actually. This was a really good experiment we did this year that I didn't expect to work. Radish as a companion. There's a tendency to underestimate how big radish leaves get. Like when you go to drill it, you've got this mental picture of a tiny little leaf. And some radish varieties, you know, they can be sort of 18 inches long, great big leaf, especially if it's something like a solanaceae, you're going to probably have added loads of compost to the bed, so the radish is going to produce extra lush leaf. But in this instance, we direct drilled radish in the first week of March. I think we didn't yeah, we probably did 5 rows and again pulled out the middle ones really small, planted tomatoes down the center, and it did get really busy at one point. By this stage, we've harvested the second and fourth rows, so the tomatoes got a bit more space. And whilst I sense that the tomatoes weren't necessarily thrilled with it, I felt whatever slight impact there was on the tomatoes was more than outweighed by having those extra radish and not having to give up a whole bed for a sort of not that important crop like radish that's still really useful to have as a veg box item. And what I've learned with that is selecting varieties with the smallest leaf. So for us, the quick growing cherry bell type radishes have quite small leaves. Rudy is my favorite. And Diana as well, which isn't organic, but Diana's a purple and white one that has really small leaves. It's remarkable. You expect them not to be big because the leaves are so tiny, but it's usually got a good radish underneath. And that's a great one as a companion. Whereas we grow a very, very quick growing white one called Albina, which is not good for companion because that's got a big leaf. And the same with Red Moon and Blue Moon, if anyone grows them, all quite large leaves. So yeah, knowing your companion, like variety specific, can make a difference. That's the toms right in amongst the radish when it was really busy. I was surprised how happy they are, though. I didn't feel that looked like an unhealthy tomato plant, despite having 4 rows of radish either side and all that foliage. They seemed happy enough. Moving on to peppers, I've included Jane's photo again as a reminder to not grow celery and peppers together. Pete said earlier he's found peppers don't really enjoy growing alongside anything, but I can't bear to see so much bare soil around the peppers, and we do lettuce, which for us works fairly well. Just we in the end have to sacrifice a couple of rows and just do 1 row of lettuce either side of peppers. And the other ones that work really well for us there are a lot of the direct drilled salads and herbs. When we plant peppers at the same time as planting, we'll direct drill either side a row of dill has worked. Buxton plantain is the best one we've done. And it doesn't get very tall, and I don't think it's competing much with the peppers, but it's really productive, and it's much nicer grown in a tunnel as well. Does anyone here grow buxton plantain? I think it's hugely underestimated. I absolutely love the stuff. Yeah, it's sometimes it's our major salad bag ingredient. Yeah, and it's got that different texture as well. It's really beautiful. That's a great one for peppers. We direct drill amaranth alongside peppers as well. The variety Passion, the bicolored amaranth leaf is really pretty. And summer purslane, but summer purslane can get a bit big. You've got to cut it really hard and be aware, make sure you rip it out nice and early. This year, we trialed the direct drilling of some brassicas, the frills mix and Mizuna alongside peppers. And I feel like the brassicas enjoyed it, but the peppers really didn't. I don't know if it was my imagination, but I really felt like there was some sort of allelopathic effect or some sort of conflict between them, that the peppers, when they didn't mind buckthorn or dill, they definitely didn't like the brassica leaves alongside, is what we experienced. Moving on to cukes, we did I've only included this slide because I couldn't find another one of cukes and spinach together, and in the background you can just about make out a bed of cukes and spinach. It's entirely exactly the same principle as with courgettes and with tomatoes. True spinach alongside cucumbers is our best combo. And this was, I mentioned that I felt the brassicas and cucurbits didn't like each other very much, and this comes from the pak choi and Chinese cabbage trial we did this year, where we planted a really dense stand of smallish pak choys. This is a variety truffle, really fantastic hybrid pak choi. We planted 5 rows, picked the middle row first, and then planted our cucumbers in amongst them. The pak choys were outstanding. It was one of the best pak choi beds we've ever had. They outgrew the slugs without much problem for once. But the cukes that went in were never happy at all. And the arrangement seemed to, the pak choys enjoyed it a lot more than the cukes did. So it's not one we're going to do again, unfortunately. This is the other end of the bed where we had Chinese cabbage, a single row of Chinese cabbage either side of cukes down the middle, and they also look pretty rough by the time the Chinese cabbages were harvested. I don't know why they hated each other so much. I think we also had a meter of turnips right at the very end when we ran out of Chinese cabbage. We just threw some turnips in, which was similar effect. So that was one of our failures there. What we did this year with cukes, after those brassicas came out, when we went along and planted a whole combination of flowers, beneficial insect attractors, because spider mite has been awful since 2023 when we first got it. Spider mite has just been the story of our cucumbers. And in 2023 and 2024, we didn't really have any cucumbers beyond the start of July, roughly. Like the plants just got hammered. So we took all the measures this year. We watered daily the whole season long. We planted Nigella, Tagetes, again, my absolute favorite. Sweet Alyssum was fantastic. And a dwarf variety of calendula. Sometimes calendula can get a bit big as a companion, but I researched the smallest variety available and we got a derogation and planted that one, which was actually really good and also great as a flower for the salad bags. But even with all of that, we still got spider mite, but it was so hot this year. It must have been a great year for spider mite. And we bought in predators, and we still had spider mite, but we had no cukes from about the second week of August. So that's an improvement on the start of July. But I remember the days when I could, without much effort, comfortably have cucumbers well into September. And that feels impossible now, spider mites everywhere on our site. If anyone's got anything to say about spider mite, please tell me, because I need whatever I can get.
Just like if you can put them in a caterpillar tunnel so that they're not living in the environment over the winter. That's because we had the same thing, but then this year haven't really got any, and that's because they're planted in a totally new part of the farm. So I think it's like rotating them away from the physical spaces. I think that's the only solution. And then we haven't done any control. No, we haven't introduced any predators or anything, and we don't really have any much spider mite at all.
So. Fantastic. Yeah, I'll definitely be looking into that for sure. Because we spent 200 quid on predators this year. Still had no cukes from mid-August. And this time I really did all the research into the predators, and still it just feels it's keeping the problem at bay a little bit. But yeah, thank you for that.
Just can you quickly repeat the plants that you use to try and ward off the spider mite? Calendula, Sweet Alyssum, and what were the other two? I think
Nigella and Tagetes. And Tagetes and Nigella and Calendula all have edible flowers, which we sell as well. We allowed a certain weed population as well. We went for the junglist approach underneath the cukes, and it was really attractive. This isn't my photo, by the way. This is another one rinsed from Oxton's because I couldn't find any photos of all the lovely flowers we did. So credit to those guys. our biggest intercropping success this year has got to be the lettuce under the peas, though. This was absolutely fantastic. We grow sugar snap peas in the tunnel. We grow an overwintering batch planted out at the start of November. And we then have a spring sown batch planted out at the start of March, and then we have outdoor sugar snaps. And I think we planted the lettuce, I can't remember, but I think it was a little bit after the peas. But the peas were fantastic, the best crop of peas we've ever had. The lettuce has thrived under there for cut and come again. We got repeat cuts. As I said, it doesn't bolt as quickly. The moisture retention was great. We watered a lot, considering that both crops were going to have water demand. But it was an absolute triumph. We had plenty of varieties under there. So I do recommend that one. We support the peas with old livestock mesh strained down the center of the bed. So the peas rise up and cling to the mesh, and they stay largely off the lettuce. It looks crowded there, but it really worked. And the lettuce kept growing back. I was worried it'd be too shaded, but it wasn't bothered on the whole, it seemed. So bear with me a sec. Failures. I just wanted to touch on some more failures that I haven't covered yet. I'm sure almost everyone who's tried intercropping has a long list of stuff that was a disaster. I've covered our cucumber problems with brassicas, and also just that radishes get bigger than you think as well. Another crop type which probably there are people here who might be able to share their experience of, but the larger brassicas grown on a field scale at very wide spacing, which at my previous farm I grew those extensively, but at my current farm we don't do them yet, though I would love to. So I'm thinking here purple sprouting, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, maybe cabbage, depending on your cabbage spacing. I'm sure we all know what it's like when you're planting out your Brussels or your PSB, and you look back and it's 90 centimeters between plants. It's an awful lot of soil in between. I'm sure there's potential there for putting lettuces in, maybe drilling some radish, something like that. Has anyone here tried that? I don't know, there's some nodding going on. With success? Yeah? Yeah? Brilliant. For anyone who missed that, that's beetroot and parsley alongside sprouts. The shade effect, I bet, helps. Lettuces under kale. Yeah. Earlier on. Yeah. That's fantastic. Lettuces under PSB, that was. Yeah, so real potential there. I can't wait to grow field scale collies again. I'm missing it like crazy. Absolutely love growing collies, but that's my thing. So that's everything I had to say about intercropping. Has anyone got any particular examples they'd like to share before we move on to catch cropping? Is that okay? I thought we'd do that now because catch cropping is slightly different.
I'll just say about the beetroot intercropping with brassicas. It doesn't work if you direct drill the beetroot when you transplant the brassicas because they're already too far behind. There have to be beetroot transplants in modules, and then it works great.
Brilliant. This is the sort of gold that we're here to hear. Do you know what I mean? These little details.
Hi, not an example per se, but I was just wondering if you have any examples of resources like books out there that might talk about intercropping in like a UK context.
No, I don't. One of the reasons I wanted to talk about this topic today, that it seems to be something that comes from our experiences. I've had stocking filler books called things like Basil Loves Tomatoes and lists of different combos, but really I think, especially when we're growing commercially and things like the impact on harvesting and those kinds of things are so important to us. For me, it's just come from trial and error and just experience and farm walks and talking to other growers. So no, I can't help. I don't know if anyone else has any suggestions. Maybe it's a book in the making. brilliant. Charles Dowding's book coming out soon on intercropping. Fantastic. Save your book tokens for that.
I was just wondering if you had any for broad beans, intercropping with broad beans.
I don't, but it came up on the UK OMG forum the other day. B?
Yes, I saw a couple of really intriguing intercropping options in Norway, where I've just been, in this biodynamic garden. And she was actually growing broad beans in between her potatoes. And so she had a row of broad beans and then a row of potatoes either side. I mean, this was on a no-dig raised bed system, not on a tractor system. So, and she figured that the broad beans were giving the potatoes just that extra bit of nitrogen, which was really interesting. And they cropped the broad beans and then the potatoes. And then the other really intriguing thing was she was growing beans with the poles about a meter between the upright diagonals. And then she was growing courgettes in the gap underneath the channels of the poles. So normally you get that strip of soil that you're not really using because it's shaded by the beans. But because the bean poles were further apart, and then she had courgettes underneath them. Again, I think it's not something that would work on a field scale, but in a no-dig sort of labor-intensive garden, it was quite neat. So, yes.
Hi, I've got a row of asparagus and looking for something that didn't get too tall to grow like on the outer edge of the asparagus bed. I've gone for summer savoury and agretti outside, which has been really luscious actually.
Luscious?
Yeah.
Great.
As the greenhouse stuff gets harder, it's sort of north of the asparagus, and it's just giving me a bit extra harvest time.
And so that shade and moisture retention helping the agretti stay soft and...
I think so, yeah.
Brilliant. Because this came up, what we could grow alongside asparagus, that came up in Pete's talk earlier as well. We've got a bed of asparagus. I'd love to experiment with that as well. Yeah, I suppose agretti's certainly quite shallow rooted, I suppose. Yeah. Yeah.
Over to cover cropping.
Yeah, well, catch cropping was the second part.
Yes,
Yeah. I think they're sort of two quite different topics. I think I put them together because they both fit into an idea of trying to make every inch count and trying to use every bit of space you have. The main challenge with catch cropping, I've always found, is making the best use of tunnel space in the time between your last overwintering or some of your Hungry Gap spring crops from the tunnels come out before the next winter stuff goes in, and how to make best use of tunnel space in high summer when a lot of leafy veg doesn't like it in there, a lot of crops find it too hot. How can we make best use of relatively short-lived tunnel crops, sort of looking mainly from mid-June to kind of mid-August kind of time? So I just wanted to share some of the experience we've had of making use of those spaces, because with all these crops, we've tried to avoid ever having empty tunnel beds in that time of year now, whereas a lot of the places I've worked, we've fallen into a habit of having quite a few empty beds then. It's just trying to make those spaces productive in a way that generates more income for the garden. I've included here this picture of amaranth, the variety Passion, on the top of a mixed, that thrives in the tunnel. We direct drill it. The first cut is always lovely. It gets a bit messy to pick after that, but it's one of those ones that adds to the salad bag all that color, and you get the red veining against green background. It's absolutely beautiful. Also in that picture, there's summer purslane. I was taught to grow summer purslane, sown in a pan, pricked out, and then transplanted as modules, which took forever. Then my ex-partner spent 10 years saying, you really should be direct drilling this stuff. And I'm so ashamed that it took me 10 years to listen, because it's revolutionary, absolutely brilliant. We direct drill summer purslane repeatedly throughout the summer. So productive, really heavy, really nice texture in the salad bag. It's one of my favorite vegetables. Can't sing its praises highly enough. We've already talked about agretti a lot, but there is a bit of agretti in that picture too. Buxton plantain, if you're not a convert, definitely give it a go. I've heard people complain that it can get a bit tough, which is why we tend to grow it in the tunnel, because it's always nice and soft. Water it loads, yeah, absolutely. And cut it frequently and try and stop it seeding, flowering is really wise. And it's a completely different shape. a very different texture to other stuff in the salad bags. Apparently, Michelin-starred chefs put like 3 leaves of it on a plate and drizzle some sauce over it. Charge you 75 quid. Good business to be in, I imagine. Bull's blood. When we think of sort of chardy stuff in a tunnel in summer, you imagine them bolting and not getting on very well, but direct drilled bull's blood, rainbow chard as a baby salad ingredient is a good way that we use our tunnel space. Works quite well for us. And coriander and shungiku. I forgot about shungiku. Does anyone grow shungiku, aka chrysanthemum greens, aka chop suey greens? Absolutely brilliant. It grows like a brassica, but it's not a brassica. It doesn't have any disease problems. Drill it and cut it at kind of Mizuna size, or let it grow up and cut it for when they call it chop suey greens. Imagine it like nearly a foot long, like a long stalky thing that you stir fry. It's got a bitter flavor that if you try it on its own, you sort of think, is this nice? But mixed in a salad bag with, cooler, less powerfully flavored things, really, really luscious. Really recommend it. And that we do direct drill it in the tunnel. Sometimes it does get a bit hot in the tunnel in summer, but it still works as a salad ingredient for us. It does well outside too. But it's another good one to keep the salad bag full. Coriander and dill, we do direct drill them in the tunnel in summer. Obviously, you don't get many cuts before it bolts, but it's still kind of low effort. At that time of year, it really outpaces the weeds and you get a good quality cut, even if drill it, cut it once, maybe twice, but it's still another useful addition to what we have that's not much effort. We have the field bindweed, the prostrate bindweed, absolutely everywhere, and it's something we just kind of have to learn to live with. So having things that can outpace the bindweed, because it's never going to go away. We tried trying to dig it out, it just doesn't happen. Works well for us. So things like this, direct drill, grow up, beat the bindweed, cut it, and then start again, is how we use our tunnels in that gap in summer. Wazontle. Does anyone grow Wazontle, aka Aztec broccoli, from real seeds? This has been a really, really useful tunnel one for us. It's often grown outdoors. It's basically edible fat hemp, pretty much. If you grow it in a tunnel, it'll reach about 9 feet high. It's pretty amazing stuff. And what we started doing was planting out Wazontle, and then when it gets woody, laying it like a hedge. So you snap the plants over, so you get a kind of mat of Wazontle stalks on the ground, which then send up the little shoots that you want, and you can almost go along with scissors and cut them that way, which was a bit of a revelation. But it loves the hot conditions in the summer, and this isn't a high demand crop, but we put it in the large veg boxes. We tend not to put it in the small or mediums, but people who get a large veg box are probably quite into veg, so you can push their boundaries a little bit more, whereas people who get smalls maybe might struggle with challenging vegetables a little bit more. And occasionally a chef will come along who absolutely loves the stuff and will give us a really good price for a big bag of it. So that's the case for Wazontle, aka Aztec broccoli. Seeds available from real seeds and dead easy to save your own as well. Celery in the tunnels in the middle of summer is great for us. My favorite combo is the early courgettes that we were talking about, that I was showing the slides that we grow alongside spinach. When we get everything correct, those tunnel courgettes, we rip them out at the end of June, at the start of July, when the outdoor crop kicks in. You don't really need those tunnel plants, and they get really big and spiky and are kind of horrible to harvest from. So getting them out of the way and getting some celery in, we plant some celery after the courgettes, and then at sort of mid to late August, we get the best crop of celery ever. Really, really nice, luscious celery, and then that's out of the way to make room for a winter crop. It's always worked quite well. And some tunnel fennel at the height of summer. I often struggle with the fennel outdoors in the middle of summer. I don't know if anyone else does, but it seems so hard to get, probably to get enough water on it to get a nice crop that doesn't go tough or bolty. Whereas in the tunnel, we can, provided we're on it, obviously they're going to bolt as well, but it's easier to get loads of water on them and then get them picked and do a big sort of 250 plants in a bed and bam, chuck them in the veg boxes. That's a fairly low effort veg box item as well. that's probably my last slide. So there we go. I said catch cropping. I've kind of just talked about high summer tunnel stuff, but I'm sure there's loads more potential there for conversation. But what time are we on? Contributions, yeah, absolutely.
So, who'd like to make the first contribution? Was that you? No. Oh, okay.
It's not a contribution. It's a question. Sorry, I know you had that photo of spinach and cucumbers. So that must be high summer. So you're growing spinach in the high summer in your polytunnel? Or have I missed
No,
time?
that's more like May.
That's early doors.
Yeah, yeah. The spinach, I sort of missed that. The spinach alongside the cukes doesn't stay in that long. It's still done by mid to late May,
Tail
usually.
end of the spinach.
Yeah. It is an interesting point, though, about the potential for spinach as a sort of direct drilled one cut crop. I don't know if anyone does that. Whether if you use like an F1, get a derogation for a variety like Santa Cruz or something really probably quite heavily bred to not bolt, could be. I got a feeling, if anyone knows Langton's farm near Crickhowell, they were saying they direct drill spinach all the way through the summer just for one cut, very little effort, drill it, cut it, hoe it out, repeat, and get the cut in before it bolts, and that works really well for them, but I haven't tried that myself. But you'd have to be growing, like variety selection would have to be very careful. I've cut Santa Cruz outdoors in July and still got a good cut from it in a shady spot. It's a variety worth trying if you get the derogation, I think.
Thanks.
So I'll go for double bubble. So contribution-wise, we've found quite successful this year was sweet corn and courgettes. Planted out at the same time, both module-based. The sweet corn is up and out the way before the courgettes go mad, and the root structures don't conflict at all. So that's worked quite well for us. And as far as a question, particularly more so on the sort of companion cropping than the catch cropping, do you find that you're ever at risk of enhancing diseases by breaking rotation, by having multiple crops of different varieties on the same ground? I know it's catch cropping, it's probably in and out too quickly to worry about, but if they're growing for a full season.
It's a really good point, especially on the spring onions as well. The thing we'd be most at risk from is probably the onions, but we grow very few, almost no alliums in the tunnel. So they only really go in with the courgettes. And if we did them with tomatoes as well, we have 8 beds in the tunnel, so I'd make sure they're not going into a bed. So we have 4 tunnels, so it's a 4-year rotation anyway. And if they were happening with the tomatoes, if you just miss the bed that the courgettes are in the following year, then you'll probably be okay. But you really want to be aware of that, and with the brassicas too, definitely.
And just like on the theme of your quick polytunnel crops that you can sow anytime, Smarties do a baby leaf radicchio, which is like for direct sowing, flexible harvest window, like flexible time to maturity, and they're kind of like for microgreens, but you can harvest their bread to be less bitter, so they don't make hard. So you could cut them if you had a quick greens, or you could cut them with scissors.
Have you tried it?
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah,
Great.
and it means you can get something that's not a brassica, because the rotation issue in the polytunnels is that's the main barrier to me in the fixed tunnels, is not being able to, wanting to rotate all my salads.
Do you order that direct from Smarties?
Yeah, from Smarties. Yeah,
Brilliant.
yeah.
Hi, I'm just wondering how you plan intercropping. Like, what does it look like on your spreadsheet that there's things going into the same bed? Like, is that hard or is that simple? You just, I don't know. Does it add any complexity when things are going in the same bed?
My cropping plan, I mark on as something like if a batch of spinach is going to be overwintering, then we're going to plant cucumbers in it. I would say something like spaced for cucumbers. So you would plan to do it like you might omit the middle row if you're doing 5 rows, for example, or you might, if it's spring planted quite soon before the other crop goes in, you might, like with the Chinese cabbage, we'd omit the middle row, and I'd have on the cropping plan spaced for cucumbers, so everyone knows that they've got to think about that when it gets planted. The other thing that sprung to mind, it's unsprung now. What was it? Oh yeah, with stuff like spinach, it's not all, especially I feel I can play a little bit more fast and loose with rotation with spinach. It's not always that planned, and lettuce as well. We have on the cropping plan in sort of late February, 2 trays lettuce for wherever. And if we've always got a few trays going spare, if you're sowing 10 trays anyway, do a couple extra. And then if you end up with space somewhere you weren't expecting, then you're ready for it. With the stuff that I feel I can be more flexible on rotation, like lettuce and spinach. With direct drilled stuff, you can make it up as you go along a bit more, because when you've got that space, you just drill it. But if it's mods, having those mods ready to go is really handy. So that's something we build in. But yeah.
Just wanted to add to the anecdote about brassicas and cucurbits not being very happy. I tried putting kale in my squash patch, and the squash didn't seem very happy. And when I did the market garden tour here with Miriam yesterday, she was suggesting that all brassicas are slightly allelopathic, she reckons, in her experience.
That's interesting. It's really interesting when we come with the same observations, not having read it in a book or whatever, but just from actually doing it. Yeah.
Any more suggestions, questions? Oh.
Me, always me. Oh, what is it written down? Oh yes. Do you know any ways, like you said you've had books and you feel like a lot of it is like conjecture of like, and I feel that way about like companion planting as well. Sometimes you'll just have a guide that's like, oh, this and this, this and this and this and this. Do you know any ways to differentiate what might actually come from science and like some kind of understanding of the nutrient profile and what might just be sort of like folklore? Or is it, for you, is it literally just you just do stuff and see if it works?
Well, I suppose you could think about root combinations, and like if something's tap rooted and tends to go deep, whether that's going to do well alongside a shallower rooted thing. If you've got several shallower rooted things together, would be one approach you could have. The thing about competition for light, that's a similar idea, really, just upside down compared to tap roots and shallow roots, which is just, it's so obvious, but that is kind of part of what you're describing, I suppose, in a way. I like the idea that there's some alchemy to it, that no one really understands why. I find that more romantic than actually finding some hard science, but I am a bit of a romantic. So I don't have a very good answer to your question, I'm afraid.
That's a good answer.
Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I've just been thinking about the winter squash bed and trying to find something that either follows on very quickly or that I can grow on as a module and plant in as a module, perhaps as the leaves are dying back, that can get going and can overwinter. And I've got a load of winter spinach coming along in modules that I'm kind of planning to plant in as soon as I can, maybe cut back some of the dying leaves on the winter squash. Have you had any experience of that? Do you think that's an idea that might work? Or
No, I've got to be honest, it sounds a bit optimistic to me. If I was going to undersow winter squash with anything, it would be clover. I'd be going for the winter cover. I know it felt like 15 years ago, it felt like quite a novel technique. Now it's almost old hat, like the broadcasting clover when the squash plants are at something like 5 leaves. It doesn't look very happy, or it's quite small all summer and then suddenly it goes boom when the squash leaves start dying off. I know that's fairly standard practice. That said, I've never had much luck with outdoor winter spinach. No, I had one good season. I was like, right, I finally cracked outdoor winter spinach. True spinach is perpetual spinach is easy. But then other years, just gets a kind of root rot if it's a wet autumn. And yeah, one year the entire bed died, and it was just from heavy rain, I think. So yeah, but are you on what scale are you on?
Small scale,
Yeah.
400 square meters.
If you were trying something like that, then I'd try perpetual spinach rather than true spinach.
Okay.
I reckon it could be worth a try.
Right, thank you.
Yes, I'd also just put something winter in, like broad beans or garlic, to follow the squash. That's what I tend to do. Yes.
So our brassicas got really hammered by the cabbage butterfly, the caterpillar. I just wondered if you have a trick that you can get those little wasps to do their job better than they did on ours.
I mean, I can share what Tolly always says about having brassicas at all stages of growth in the garden somewhere the whole time to provide a constant habitat for the predatory. It begins with C, you know, the one that. Thanks. And Catesia globerata. A fascinating experience I had. I had a fascinating experience a few years back with meshes and butterflies, where we had a bed of Swede, where it was meshed, and then the mesh half blew off. So half the bed was netted, with EnviroMesh, half the bed wasn't. And the butterflies have got under the mesh, as they always do. Meshing against butterflies isn't very effective. And the entire bed was covered in caterpillars, but half the bed barely got touched because where the mesh had blown off, predators had access. I presume birds who came in and picked the caterpillars off the plants. And then the half that was still covered in mesh got absolutely hammered and never really recovered. And the half where the mesh had blown off really thrived. So there was a bit of a message there in using mesh to trap the butterflies in. I mean, in a year like this one, I'm sure we've all seen those skeletal kale plants out in the field. Yeah, sorry, if I had the trick, I'd be really rich.
Hi, thanks. My question's got nothing to do with intercropping, but if we're talking about pests, we've got a walled garden where I work, and we've got moles, and we've got no idea what to do against them. Have you got any tips? Or anyone?
You sure it's moles?
Yeah.
Definitely not voles.
Probably no moles. We find sometimes the cats catch them, and there's a dead one.
It's
so-
a dead mole, yeah.
Yeah. Nothing we can do?
No, I've never
killing them.
found too much of a long-term problem.
Okay,
I
straight out.
find they're around a bit and then they go and it's fine. If we want to talk about vole problems, which I know isn't your question, but it's clearly what I'm itching to talk about. Yeah, no, like on the estate where we are, it's got a history of being a hunting estate with loads of sadistic gamekeepers, and there's loads of mole traps around and talk of gassing them and all this horrible stuff, which obviously I'm not remotely interested in. But I've never found them enough of a problem to do. Like, there's been molehills which in the fields we kick over sometimes, so it doesn't play havoc with the mowers. But no, sorry, I can't help at all. Don't know if anyone else can.
Hold a minute while I get you the.
So I just want to second what you said about long-term problems in moles. It won't be a long-term problem because once they make their burrows, that's what they'll use generally. So the creation of a new kind of complex is what causes the damage. But once it's there, as long as you don't destroy the complex, then they've got no reason to make more molehills, as far as I know. And in answer to Tracy's question, so if Pete was here, because he did a talk on this last year, if you remember, he also mentioned umbellifers. It's not just brassica flowers, it's the size of the flowers. So umbelliferous flowers of like dill and coriander and stuff, if you intercrop that with your brassicas, then that will also provide the feed for the Catesia glomerata, just as well as if it were rocket or some other sort of brassica flower. So umbellifers as well as brassicas.
Yeah, Pete's advice was if you're growing dill or coriander, always let it flower if you possibly can. Yeah.
The other thing he said is that they are quite particular. So once they start feeding on an umbelliferous flower, that's what they'll be used to. And so that same wasp is unlikely to then want to go to a brassica flower because they're so sort of conditioned then to use the umbelliferous flowers. Well, whether that's true or not, I don't know, but he did say it. So it must be. It's Pete.
Pete Dollymore from formerly Hankham Organics, now the Montessori place.
Basically, has anyone else got something to say? Because I've already chatted a lot. Do you want to go?
Voles. Yeah, freaking voles, my God. The vole problem. So the organic tenant farmer who was on our site for 20 years before we came along, he said it's been his life's mission breeding voles at Courtfield where we are. His techniques of like the way he managed the hay and all that kind of thing provided enormous habitat for voles, and we have huge populations. We're in the Wye Valley, which is famous for its predatory birds. Like birds of prey around our way are mundane. Like there's clouds of them all the time. So if anyone talks about encouraging habitat for predatory birds, like we've got that in spades, and it's not enough to deal with our vole issues. The cat is the best thing we've got at the moment, to be honest. I do, sorry if this offends anyone, put peanut butter traps out, which sometimes catch voles. Mostly they catch mice, but it's mainly the voles. So that helps a bit. And sometimes it's quite a small vole population that does an eye-watering amount of damage. The other thing that's helped us is we stopped fleecing the beetroot. And when we put loads of early beetroot out and fleeced it for a Hungry Gap harvest, but I think underneath the fleece, the voles just felt so safe, and they were safe in there with their favorite food stuff. And even Turnip the cat couldn't get to them because they were under there. We have a new cat called Beetroot, funnily enough. So Turnip and Beetroot are doing what they can. So like knowing that like beetroot is what they love the most more than anything else. So not fleecing your beetroot, definitely. Giving the cat access to the walled garden and doing things to encourage your cat to go in there, definitely going to help. Like we have to net our tunnels against rabbits and deer. We get deer in the tunnels. We've got such high deer pressure. But then that stops the cat going in. So if there's a way of having a cat flap for the tunnel, because they get the early beetroot as well. They're quite, with beetroot, voles are quite variety specific. They will prefer, I think the golden they go for first. We grow 4 different colors of beetroot to make a rainbow beetroot bunch, which is revolutionary in terms of beetroot sales. People love a rainbow beetroot bunch. But so we grow golden, Chioggia, white, and red varieties, and they tend to go for the golden the most. So it does serve as a kind of distraction crop, but it still amounts to, like, for us, probably thousands of pounds worth of damage we've had from the voles this year. Avoiding mypex as well. They love like forming little burrows in mypex. And funnily enough, woodchip paths, I often find there's vole tunnels down the woodchip paths, so I presume they like that too. But woodchip paths have loads of other benefits, so how you balance that out. There is a thing that's a point. No dig, yeah. It's terriers. Yeah, introduce a predator. But it is a serious point about the proliferation of no-dig market gardens and all this stuff. We are creating really good environment for voles to eat our beetroots. Is one of the challenges.
Brilliant. Thank you so. Is it very quick? Yeah. Okay. One more.
I used to have a lot of trouble with voles on my beetroot. I increased the spacing on the beetroot to about 18 inches between rows and used the space between them for spring onions. And with the added space between the beetroots, it didn't give such good cover for the voles, and I now hardly get any damage. Also, with the moles, we had an outbreak of rats that winter on the compost heaps. They like using mole holes, and that got rid of the moles by having a rat infestation.
Thank you so much. That is absolutely brilliant. Like the companion planting spring onions with wider space beetroot, that's exactly the kind of thing that we're here to hear. It's brilliant. Thank you.
Yes.
I really appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Dom, but thank you all of you. Sparrow, when he described this gathering to me, this is exactly the kind of session I think he envisaged, these really, really practical, sharing these tips, and he's not in here, but I think his heart would sing to hear about it. So thank you, Dom, and thank you everyone for your contributions, and let's give a big hand for Dom.